Hey guys, it's Crystal Briefs. In this video, we're going to be looking at several 442 variants and see how they affect the results when clashing with one of the 424 variants, 857, from a bigger picture. I compared among 442, 974, and 875. I'll probably be doing other 442 variants in the future. To review what I've talked about a 442 variant in my past videos, 442 variants generally aims to beat a 424 variant in ranged phalanx. There's a mechanism or retargeting sequence that favors the 442 variant. For better insight, please watch one of my videos that specifically, although superficially, talks about the mechanism, link in the description. And here's the condition in which we did the tests. I had my testing partner do 857 with different phalanxes. And for each phalanx, I sent either 442, 974, or 875 with some variations in the formation. My hero comp is 221 and my partner's comp is 122, which is important to bear in mind because it's a potential influence on the mechanism or the retargeting sequence. It's also important that we did not change the familiar lineup throughout the investigation. The familiar lineups here are by no means the best, because I intentionally omitted Hellrider. It's most favorable if you could tailor the familiar to the particular environment you're in. But I'll certainly do more detailed familiar comparisons in the future, and I've tried to match my stats to my testing partner by completely emptying my accessories like this, in order to fit his current stat like this. So these tests are designed to simulate an opponent with nearly equal strength. That means the result of this test is less likely representative of any battle where there's a significant statistical difference. Enough of technical aspect, let's get into the reports in detail. So this report is a 442 ranged phalanx on 857 ranged phalanx, and as you can see, it's a massive win, indicating the 442 winning mechanism was perfectly induced. That becomes clear with just over half of the ranged being damaged, which is the hallmark for the 442 winning mechanism. The retargeting sequence is determined in a way that 442 massively benefits. And of course with Hellrider it's going to be much easier, but that's another story. Now, what if you did 974? Is it easier to induce the 442 winning mechanism? Theoretically, it's actually a bit harder. You're increasing the inf count and decreasing your ranged count, both by 12.5%. So your ranged will die 12.5% earlier. Now, by increasing 12.5% inf, does that mean the opponent's ranged is killed 12.5% earlier? Actually, no. 974 inf can only kill the enemy ranged 11.2% faster mathematically. 974 ranged dies 12.5% earlier, and you can only kill the opponent's ranged 11.2% earlier. So you're slightly shifting the timing of your ranged squads dying further away from 442 winning mechanism. A 442 variant needs to kill enemy ranged faster than the enemy does on your 442. All in all, it's inherently harder for 974 to induce the 442 winning mechanism against a 424 variant in ranged phalanx on a mathematical basis. And that's what it's partially reflected in this report. The casualty difference is much smaller now compared to the 442 one. Furthermore, the ranged in 442 is actually a decent source of damage against 424 ranged. So by decreasing the ranged count as with 974, that slows down the killing of the 424 ranged by a bit, and that sometimes explains the importance of ranged attack stat in 442. However, it's not just the comp, but also the familiar lineup, hero comp, and stats distribution that join the equation. So it actually gets really complicated when we argue 974 is less competent in inducing the 442 winning mechanism. Okay, that's a very tough digression for you to listen to. I won't be talking very technical about that anymore, hopefully. But 974 does have its own strength, so don't worry. I'm not saying at all that you shouldn't use 974. Now, going back to the reports, you see the damage 974's range took has increased a lot compared to the previous report. This is because the retargeting sequence has been slightly altered compared to the 442, partially due to 1-2 hero comp in 857. And this report is the entrance into what I call a borderline mechanism, in which 442 winning mechanism and 424 winning mechanism starts to get mixed up, which is a few videos worth on its own. Next report is 875. 875 lost just by a bit, so it's harder for 875 to induce the 442 mechanism than both 442 and 974. And if you look at the details, it's still a borderline case. 875 ranged is not completely dead, and some of the 875 damage went to inf, which is not supposed to in a perfect 424 winning mechanism. That means 857 did not completely induce a 424 winning mechanism. And if the result displays borderline mechanisms, it suggests that slight change in your stats or T5 count could affect the result dramatically by shifting the timing of the ranged squats dying. So among those, 442 seems to be the best inducer of the 442 winning mechanism. Now, in the next part of the investigation, we saw how each 442 variant reacts to 857 inf phalanx. And this is the report of 442 countered by inf phalanx. Actually, 442 managed to win, which was a bit surprising. This familiar lineup is definitely helping in this case. Bear in mind that we were nearly equal strength, and actually my stat was set to be ever so slightly weaker than my testing partner, and my 442 still won. That kind of demonstrates it's still possible to deal with 424 inf phalanx with a simple 442. And this is where 974 comes in. It can slightly better deal with 857 inf phalanx compared to 442. Ranged is countered by inf, so reducing the ranged will supply less casualties to the opponent, and its increased inf count will do slightly more damage to enemy than 442 does. And that's a theoretical interpretation of the comp. But there's a caveat. If you look at 857 Cav, it received some damage there, as with the previous report, and this damage is caused by the Pact 5 familiar. This happened because by the time 442 lost 8% of the troops at which Pact 5 activates, the opponent may not have inf as the biggest squad. Maybe off topic, but this kind of demonstrates that the Pact 5 targets are not determined by the initial troop count. If the Pact 5 hits Cav, the damage 442 receives won't be reduced much because ranged is inherently resistant to Cav. So in this situation, 974 is slightly disadvantaged by its own Pact 5 familiars. I've actually done each situation 3 to 4 times to gauge the impact of the Pact 5 familiars, and the reports I'm showing are the ones that are closest to the average. Testing takes a lot of time, and that's why I omitted Helldrider from this investigation. The complexity Helldrider adds to the test is just phenomenal, and that could be why we don't see other YouTubers doing the test. Anyway, it's time we moved on. Next is 875 against 857 in phalanx, and this fits our expectation better. 875 can more comfortably beat 424 in phalanx since the Cav count is increased in 875. So 875 looks to be the best against in phalanx among the tested 442 variants. However, if 857 had inf shield, that'll be a different story. Also, if the opponent recognizes 875 is coming, there might be less chance they will choose in phalanx to defend, so it might be a high-level mental game in a real situation. In the next part of the investigation, we tested 442 variants against 857 Cav phalanx. 857 Cav phalanx can actually deal with the 442 variant in ranged phalanx, better than you'd probably imagine. So this report is 442 ranged phalanx against 857 cav phalanx. Here, 442 barely managed to win, but if 857 is statistically stronger, it's pretty easy to imagine 857 would win, right? Also, 857 uses cav shield, which is working to its full advantage. The details show that my ranged is getting destroyed because the intact inf in 857 keeps doing a lot of damage to 442's ranged all the way till the end. And 974 is, as expected, more vulnerable to cav phalanx because of less ranged count. 875 slightly improves the result compared to 974 because 875's cav does a bit more damage to the opponent cav. It's the same troop type to troop type interaction. So among these variants, 442 can best deal with 857 cav phalanx. But please don't jump the gun. So far, you might have thought, oh, so I can defend 442 with a 424 cav phalanx? Well, 424 cav phalanx comes with a huge risk. 424 cav phalanx is extremely vulnerable to 442 using inf phalanx. Let me show you. So this is 442 inf phalanx against 857 cav phalanx. And the result is like, oof. In this case, 442 ranged is destroying the opponent's cav quite fast, so that 442 inf is actually indirectly protected. I think it's representing offense is the best defense kind of situation. 974 is less destructive in this situation, as you can see, because the ranged count is reduced. Therefore, the opponent's cav front is surviving longer to do more damage to 974's inf, but it's still a massive win, I think. Same with 875. The result should be theoretically better than 974, considering the total damage 875's ranged and cav is doing. Again, it's a pack fight targeting issues. And as an extension of our curiosity, we tested some 442 variants against 992. First, we tested 442 against a 992, and 442 lost. This matches a theoretical expectation. 992 has more inf attack power, which can destroy 442's range faster than the opposite. As you can see, 442 failed to destroy all 992 ranged within the 40-second time frame. However, with 974, the increased inf count is fully working and destroying nearly all the ranged in 992, while giving out less casualties. And 974 also beats simple 884 for a similar reason. Okay, I think that's pretty enough for this video. I've got you a summary table for all the results I've showed you in the video, so you can come back later for any reference. I've squeezed all the variables in a single table, so feel free to take your time to understand this table. Each 442 variant has its own strength and weaknesses. 442 is particularly good at dealing with 424 in ranged phalanx. 974 is reasonably competent against a 424 ranged phalanx, but it's good against any ranged dominant 442 variant sitting in ranged phalanx. It may also better deal with the 424 in inf phalanx than simple 884. 875 could still maybe induce 442 winning mechanism, but it shines when it hits an inf phalanx. Bear in mind that the results could dramatically change with familiar lineups and possibly stats distribution, so never use my results as the only reference to compare with your results. Thanks a lot for watching and see you later.